Hi there. So today I want to talk about, well, sort of about two things, psychosis and fasting. We'll get to that later, see how it links, but first thing to do really, I think, is to define psychosis so we can know what we're talking about. And for me, I had a look on the internet and there's varying definitions. You go to like the different dictionaries, they've all got slightly different definitions as you'd expect. So the most sensible place, well, is the etymology. Like, what does the word mean? Where does it come from? The elements that make up the word, and then the DSM as well. So first off, we talk about the etymology. So it's made up of two parts. You've got psych and then osis. Psych coming from the Greek psyche, which is an interesting word on a few different levels. It means soul mainly. That's the kind of the main designation, but is also used to mean mind as well. Although there's another word in Greek for that, which is nous, which is where we get the English word nous from. Say someone's got some nous, in Greek they say ekiston nousu. And then a different word again for spirit, which is pneuma. So yeah, really it means soul. And then osis is a suffix, which again, as with most etymology, there's some confusion and things aren't completely clear, but it basically means the state of being, condition of something. And then according to some etymologies, specifically with medical conditions, it can mean an abnormal condition. So you've got other osises. You've got cirrhosis, like liver damage, asbestosis, illness from exposure to asbestos. But then you've got other ones. You've got hypnosis, hypno coming from sleep, which is just like sleep phenomenon, really. And ketosis, the state where the body is burning ketone bodies. And then, yeah, osteoporosis, so illness from the porousness of bones. But the gist of it is soul thing. And then psyche in Greek, you pronounce it, sounds like psyche. So this is the kind of psychosis that I've gone through. So to me, that means that like part of my psychosis, or psychosis in general, leads to the sea. Like the sea is a key for it. And I realise it sounds pretty outlandish. And I feel like reality is fairly outlandish. And now saying outlandish, if you're not on the land, where are you? In the sea. So you can see how this kind of spirals. Anyway, that aside, and then it's actually, yeah, psyche in Greek is spelt with the Greek alphabet. So it starts with a psi, a letter psi, which is shaped like a trident. Yeah, so that's another little quirk. So that's the word. That's kind of where it comes from and what it means etymologically. If you're tracing it from Greek, which means soul thing. There are different ways to interpret that. I mean, also, before we finish up etymology bit, my various stages of my psychosis, I mean, if you break it down in English, bare English, then yeah, I thought it meant that I had a sister who was a psycho, which again probably sounds even more crazy than the psyche psychosis link, but I think there's a way that can make sense, which would be that I would argue that the female of the species are more, I don't know if they're more prone to psychosis. It'd be interesting to study that. I'm sure that's available information, but rather than psychosis, I'd say that the female of the species tend to be more psychic. So perhaps that's what that means, or that's the way that I'm going to have to interpret it. because following that up, females, at least in human physiology, are the smaller of the two sexes, so they have less physical strength and make up for that in mental strength, really. Despite the fact that in Greek, psyche actually means soul, not mind, in our etymologies, we use it a lot to mean mind, like psychoanalysis, psychopaths, which really, again, that's another word that's probably been really corrupted, but it should just mean way of the mind, someone who's a psychopath, or psychic, again, all of these psych words. So that's the etymology of the word, or at least the etymology with my slightly psychotic input on it. Then what causes it is another important place to go, and there are various causes. I mean, my psychosis was diagnosed as drug induced, and that's probably one of the most common diagnoses, as far as I'm aware. My understanding is that it's more like psychosis is revealed rather than induced. So I would say that it's about revealing things that are in your subconscious that for some reason rise to the surface, and that can be use of drugs, particularly psychedelics, which, I mean, again, the word there, psychedelics, it's like psychedelic means mind revealing. So a psychedelic drug is going to reveal parts of your mind that were hidden and that you perhaps suppressed when you were leading your life before psychosis. So yeah, drugs are one cause. It took me a while. I was very in denial about that because I felt like cannabis in particular was a really useful thing for me. I felt like alcohol didn't really suit me so well, despite many years of effort persevering with it. And so I was just really reticent to say that cannabis had anything to do with it. But in retrospect, it had a lot to do with it. But I would say it doesn't cause it. It kind of reveals something that's already there. I think in the case of cannabis, it thins the veil between the material and the physical realms, and lets you see and hear things that you otherwise wouldn't, and then that can kind of snowball. So that'd be one reason that it manifests. It's like some form of trauma or extreme joy, which kind of links in with the mystical experience. So that's another way that people can have psychotic experiences. They just experience something in this reality that is so awe-inspiring or terrifying that it pushes them mentally to a place they haven't been before, and then that can start revealing things as well. And no doubt there are other routes to psychosis. I mean, I would argue that in a truly sane society, these are things that it's basically discovering things that have been hidden, but discovering them in a traumatic, disorganized, chaotic way. So for me, my first psychotic experience would have been taking LSD. I didn't recognize it as such then. That is inducing it there. And then after that, it was a few years, probably 2 years, until my next truly what I would recognize as, let's say, episode of psychosis. And how does it manifest? So it can manifest as incoherence. So I might be a bit incoherent now. That's probably because I'm juggling. I don't feel particularly psychotic. I'm not hearing voices, which is one of the main, for me, is like the main sign of of being in a psychotic headspace. But yeah, it manifests as incoherence and kind of inability to communicate clearly, because if you imagine that someone is in this, they've basically kind of discovered the spirit realm, and they're like picking up calls and getting communication, and they don't know quite who they're talking to, what they're talking to, because you can't physically see it. Or I can. Some people have visual, what's it called? Hallucinations. Mine are mainly auditory. So you've got kind of, yeah, it's like you've gone into split screen mode, to use like a gaming analogy, and you're trying to deal with both. On one screen you've got your physical reality of what's around you, the people, the places, the things. You're dealing with that. On the other screen you've got like these voices and these potential visual hallucinations and other stuff going on. You're trying to blend the two and be functional on both of them, and that, yeah, isn't always easy. So that's kind of how it manifests for a lot of people. I've got written here "out to lunch," which is an excellent expression. So someone who is in a psychotic headspace, it's like their head in the cloud. The head is in the clouds. They're on another planet. There's lots of idioms to describe that state of mind. You know, when someone it's the same as kind of almost if you're daydreaming, but you don't necessarily have a choice about that. So, I mean, that's, yeah, then on the other end of the spectrum, it can manifest as catatonia, dumbness, so reluctance to speak, someone who just seems really kind of eyes glazed over, and not with us, you know, so their mind is somewhere else. And that's what, from my perspective, that's what is going on in that situation, is that their mind is in the spirit world. And that's not necessarily an unhealthy thing. It's just that when it happens in a chaotic, unprepared way, then it can be dangerous and unsettling, stressful, especially when you're then being told that it's all made up and that none of it's real. And then that's where you can get into these loops of like people feeling like they're being persecuted and paranoia and all this stuff. If you're telling someone who is experiencing something very, very real, and you're telling them that it's all, you know, it's not real, which is what the Western medical system does, I think that's quite a dangerous thing to do. So I'm not a doctor, but my advice would be, well, yeah, I mean, go seek a doctor if you're worried about someone who's got psychosis, but just be gentle and be aware that that's probably what's going on in their head, is that they're responding to things that you can't see or hear, but they can see and hear. And you know, it's like they're in a dream world, but they're also in the physical world. So yeah, they may have difficulty managing their attention. For me, it was like I was trying to juggle a load of conversations. There's someone talking to you, but you're trying to not be rude. Someone asks you a question, you're trying to respond to that question. At the same time, like, there's other things coming at you. It's like you're juggling a switchboard. So this, again, I was thinking earlier about the male-female divide, and women are better multitaskers. So perhaps they are less diagnosed with psychosis because they're better able to manage like multiple things going on. So it might just be that women are more psychic and maybe men are more psychotic because we can't handle so much going on. Right, this has actually got a lot longer than I thought it would, so I think maybe we'll just leave it there. And if you have any questions, yeah, actually, this is just more of a folly, but I was thinking about what the opposite of psychosis would be, and for me that would be like being stuck purely in the material world, which is like the Western default position, unless you're born into and I don't really know how this works, but if you're born, I imagine there are families and settings in which psychosis is kind of dealt with as a rite of passage, and is well, it's more a case that it's not, that the spirit is not suppressed in kids. So you grow up learning about spirits and angels and demons and devas and such, rather than growing up learning that that's untrue. So I would say we exist, to kind of coin a Greeklish word, we exist in a state of psychosis, meaning that we are of the material world rather than juggling the two, which I believe is what we should be doing, although it's not easy if you're not well equipped to do it. Although I will say psychosis doesn't really, I say Greeklish because physikos really means nature, but this is, you see how we get bastardized etymologies, because it should be ilikosis, which would be materiality. And yeah, I think that's everything really. Stick something in the comments if anything's piqued your attention. And fasting, I didn't even talk about fasting. Yeah, so that is a good way, I would say, or can be another cause of psychosis. And if you want to experience a level of psychosis, if you've got a family member or friend or whatever who's going through it and you just can't get your head around it, which is understandable, then and you don't want to go on an LSD trip or like go through a potentially very traumatic life event by doing drugs that you're not ready for, then fast, because I would say fasting is it's probably the original way to induce a mystical state. When you fast beyond, like, I mean, for me, I fasted a couple of days ago, and when you get beyond like 24 hours or so, you start to feel really light. You feel almost quite wired, like you have quite a lot of energy, less attached to the material world. You've got, your stomach's not it's not saying anything. You're not thinking with your stomach, and you are much more. You've got more energy to spend in the spirit world. So that would be a safe way to induce some psychosis and get an idea for what someone might be going through. Also, just a very interesting experience in and of itself. Be careful with fasting, just Google it, be sensible. Recommend liquid fasting rather than dry fasting to begin with, so keep your fluid levels topped up. Yeah, and that is, that's everything. See you next time. Bye.